Okay, good evening all. Welcome to Policy and Resources. Particular welcome to those members who, this is their first meeting, maybe the first meeting of the council that they've attended. You are most welcome. Go through the usual preamble. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. And for those I may have not met before, I'm Councillor James Stanley, Chair of PNR. Okay, to the agenda, item 1, substitutes. Julie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we do have substitute. Shafaz Ditta is substituting for Stephen Hodgson. Shafaz isn't here at the moment, and he's stuck in traffic and is making his way, and he should be with us fairly shortly.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any? Councillor Rias.
Thank you, Chair. Sought advice from the monitoring officer, just a minor, sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? Minor declaration interest in relation to budget item in terms of charging for the Worcester show as chair of the Worcester Mela. But it's a non-pecuniary one. Thank you.
Okay, many thanks. No others? Okay. Item 3, public representations. Julie? No. Item 4 will be the minutes from the last time we met. Obviously, primarily for the benefit of those who were here on that occasion. I'll just go through them page by page, and then we'll just pause for a second should anyone wish to make a comment or ask a question. So, page 1, please. 2, 3, Adrian.
I wondered if you could report any progress or not on item 113.
Okay. David, do you want to speak to that now? That's the Worcester Warriors. Is there anything we can throw in at this point?
Thank you for that question, through you, Chair. No, there has been no progress. I can just confirm to the members that Jim O'Toole had agreed to attend a meeting with members this evening prior to this meeting, but withdrew from that meeting due to the fact that there were still ongoing negotiations and also concerns that some of the questions raised broached the subject of commercial sensitivity, so he didn't feel that he could adequately answer the questions at this stage. So that has been postponed, and we will invite Jim to come to a future meeting of the members. Thank you.
Thank you. Page 4, 5, and 6. I'm hearing nothing from the floor, so we'll assume that that's good. So, to item 5, the MTFP, and Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Those of you who were with us in February, and those of you will know, and those of you who weren't will need to know that at that point, when we were setting our budget and our medium-term financial plan for the next 5 years, we faced an initial gap of 1.7 million between our costs and our income. And that gap, as was presented at the time, is set to continue to grow up to the region of 3.8 million by 2027 and 28. The fundamental reason for this is that ultimately our costs, our increases in costs, continue to outstrip our increases in income. We restricted, for example, in council tax to 2 or 3% per year, whereas inflation on our costs and our salary budgets has been recently more in the region of 10%. Energy costs in particular, we know have significantly doubled in recent times. And there are more pressures to come. We're expecting new planning reforms, new reforms around waste collection. We've got the Environment Act bringing in new things, and the Building Safety Act, all of which will bring additional pressures to the council. So it is evident that we are not able to continue to accept that budget gap. This year's gap, the 1.7 million, we've met by recommitting a number of our existing earmarked reserves to support that funding. We can't continue to do that. And therefore, we've got to introduce a process by which we will seek to close that gap before we set the budget in February 2024. So we've developed, as a corporate leadership team, an approach to that, which is set out in the report. I'll just cover the basic principles of that, but fundamentally, it's a three-stage process. So first of all, we will look to identify any immediate savings that we can make, particularly if they bring in-year benefits, so we can reduce that 1.7 million take from reserves during the year. And that will include things like vacancies that we're already aware of, relatively straightforward things, reductions in certain back office budgets and so on and so forth. Once we've followed that process through, we will then introduce, at the end of this month, a voluntary redundancy exercise. And we ran a similar exercise a few years ago and followed exactly the same principles in respect of that. This creates a process which is about 6 weeks for individuals to come forward if they're interested in retiring early or pursuing different careers and volunteering for redundancy. And in order to incentivize that, we set a multiplier against the statutory scheme for redundancies, which is at 1.5 times. So in effect, the redundancy cost, the benefits for that would be half as much again as it is under the statutory scheme. If in the event we come to our position towards the autumn when those two elements haven't achieved the savings that we need to achieve, then there is the possibility that we will need to make further reductions in service capacity and introduce compulsory redundancies. So that is a feature which is a potential, it's a risk at this stage. We're not actually proposing that there will be any such redundancies, but it is a possibility. Therefore, we'll be advising staff side representatives shortly after the meeting to let them know that there is a risk that we may have to face towards the end of the year. Now, the principles in which we're going to implement this process are just a couple of things I want to refer to in terms of the committee. So this will be a top-down driven process. So it is up to the corporate leadership team to try and identify areas where we can reduce costs and increase income. We will look across all areas, whether they be statutory services or non-statutory services, accepting that in every case there needs to be a reasonable business case to justify the decision. Secondly, we will be bringing the results of those deliberations through to this committee as a primary committee for looking after resources, and we will do that on a quarterly basis so that each, in effect, more or less, each of the meetings between now and October will be bringing forward a set of proposals, and we seek agreement on those so that we hope to get to the end of the year with all of those agreed and the savings done before we get to the actual budget setting time. Thirdly, and perhaps significantly, one of the approaches which we will undertake is to recognise that we have limited capacity. It's not a question of simply reducing numbers and spreading the workload. The principle that we've got to take is that this is a less for less. So if we need to reduce staff, we need to reduce resources, then that may mean, therefore, that we have to reduce services, either by standards or to the extent that we have to cease particular activities. The third element of that, therefore, comes in because we have got still substantial reserves, which we can use, but as we recognised previously, those are all committed to existing decisions that the council has made. We've got very little uncommitted reserves left. Therefore, there will have to be, during the course of a year, a process of reallocating some of those reserves to make sure that we can pick up the costs, meet the costs of the redundancy exercises if we need to do that. I've identified some in the financial implications section. They are meant to be examples. They're just examples of things which we can repurpose. We'll have to go through a more definitive process for doing that during the course of the year. But it's just to illustrate that we do have that capacity, but it will require some hard decisions about things which we previously committed to, which we now have to repurpose in order to get ourselves into a position where our increases in expenditure are matched annually by increases in income, so we can set a zero budget in February and continue that through the life of the medium-term financial plan. So it's going to be a complex and lengthy process, but we will keep everybody fully informed and be as open about what we need to do as possible. And hopefully we'll be able to make our way through that in the fullness of time. I'm happy to explore that and answer any questions that you may have at this stage.
Questions or comment, please? Mel Alcott.
Chair, thank you. And thank you to Shane and all the officers for the work on this. I just think it's, you know, we're left with little choice. It's just, I think, a sad indictment on national government and how they've not looked after local government for so long. So just a comment, really. Thank you.
Lynn Denham.
Thank you, and thank you to officers for the work done on this and to getting us to the position where we are. Yeah, public finances are under challenge. It feels as though, you know, central government are wanting more things and not necessarily giving us the money. And certainly, you know, what we want to aspire to, what we want to deliver within Worcester City is going to be a challenge to fund. And staff resource employees are the biggest proportion of our spend. It feels ideally I would rather not be looking at redundancy schemes, but I think, you know, we have to do that in order to keep the council in financial health and to monitor that. The technicalities and the timings around voluntary redundancy are really important. You know, whilst we want to make decisions as soon as possible and to reduce costs as soon as possible, the table that we've got here is, you know, that is the process and the timing of the process. So that's why this is on the agenda for literally our first meeting of the new council. I don't think it's not what I would want to be the first item on the agenda, but we are where we are, as they say. So thank you to officers for the work done on that, and obviously we'll do our best to kind of, you know, support through the technical processes that lie ahead.
Thank you. Any further questions or comment? Robin Norfolk.
Thank you, Chair. With reference to paragraph 3.4, I'm a bit confused about the report. Are we being asked to make a decision on those recommendations this evening?
Yeah, through you, Chair. The process which we've outlined, which I've just outlined, is designed that we bring forward proposals to the committee on a quarterly basis. So the first time that we'll do this will be at the July meeting. We intend to have discussions with group leaders in advance of those meetings so we can have a chance to explore these ideas and bring forward the proposals and seek agreement. Those two items which are included at paragraph 3.4, we discussed with group leaders on the 3rd of April and agreed that we would proceed with those. So we're not asking for agreement of the committee at this stage, but we'll be presenting those amongst a range of other things at the meeting in July. Our anticipation is, as I say, this is steered and led by the corporate leadership team, is that the items that we'll be bringing to the committee will be ones which can readily be approved.
Adrian, then Steve.
I'm sorry. No, that's fine. I wasn't quick enough off the block, obviously. So that kind of doesn't, and this is a technical thing, I guess, is that the recommendation talks about a meeting of the 7th of February. It talks about the voluntary redundancy scheme, and it talks about the reallocation of 500,000 from existing earmarked reserves. It doesn't talk about the meeting that took place in April with the CLT and group leaders to discuss items 3.4 perhaps I'm just getting the wrong end of the stick, but would it be possible to move 3 or to make a change to the recommendation such that the topics covered by 3.4 specifically this evening are referred to either the Income Management Subcommittee or back to this committee at a later point, where we've got a little bit more detail about what the impact of those changes?
Through you, Chair. Sorry if I didn't quite make that clear. We'll be bringing those back on the July meeting to this committee.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the proposals before us are a mixture of cost savings and income generation opportunities that will be coming back to committee through the year. I mean, it may be too early to say, but do you have any kind of impression as to what scope there might be for more of the deficit to be covered by income generation than by cost saving?
Through you, Chair. In my view, yes, it's too early to say at this stage. We've had an initial exercise, which is discussions with all of the heads of services about what might be achievable within each of the service areas, and that has highlighted a number of suggestions, but we need to work through them and firm them up and make sure that they are actually achievable and that they result in cashable savings. So once we've completed that exercise, then we'll be in a better position to start to talk about that, Steve. But yes, by July, we'll have some initial proposals and things which we think would be quite readily achievable by that stage.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose it's just a referral back to that 3.4 paragraph, really, and perhaps as an example for items that might come forward through the rest of the year. Will we have sufficient information on the agenda and options available about the costs of, for example, charging at the Worcester Show, not charging, what different rates of charges, what the past experience has shown us, what happens in other areas, etc., etc. Will we have a paper that outlines those sorts of things so we can make a fully informed decision, or is it going to be a statement from Group Leaders CLT?
Through you, Chair. I think the answer to that, Adrian, would be a mixture of both. I mean, I think it's in the Group Leaders protocol that where we have decisions which are financial decisions which will have an impact on policy and on delivery of services, then they are done through consultation with members. So our expectation is that there will be a number of things which are quite straightforward and won't need a great deal of discussion, because they will be, I think, either not have a policy impact or not have a service impact, or will be fairly self-evident. There will be other items which will need more detail and more discussion. And as always, we'll attempt to bring forward through the Group Leaders process and through the agenda planning process drafts which will enable us to make sure we've got the right amount of information for discussion at the committee.
Thanks. Through you, Chair. I just want to add that the approach we are planning to take is to bring suggestions for either savings or income generation to members as and when we can throughout the year. We've got a number of policy and resources committees set out in our forward plan, and we will bring forward recommendations at each of those committees. And I think it's fair to say there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, as Shane has said, this year we have a gap of 1.7 million. If we can bring forward savings during this financial year, that will reduce the amount we need this year to cover our costs. At the moment, it's 1.7 million. Things that we can bring forward this year will reduce that burden on that 1.7 and allow us to keep some of that in reserves. So I think we want to bring forward proposals as and when we can. The other reason for that is we don't want to get to the end of the year and present members with a £1.7 million list and say, this is it. That will not help us this financial year because the money by that time will be effectively spent, and it could be a very big and very difficult list. Now, the downside of that approach, of course, will be that as we bring forward recommendations to members, it might seem from your side of the table rather ad hoc, and you won't have in your file or in the report the complete picture of all the things that will be coming throughout the year. But we hope that you can bear with us on that process and make timely decisions as and when we can. If you feel at any time during that process a decision cannot be made with regard to a recommendation, it is probable that officers will bring that back at the next opportunity as we start to develop a larger and larger list. But we are going to try to work through this on an incremental basis rather than wait till the end of the year and give a big list of recommendations, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any further questions or comment? Sorry, Marjorie, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I must say, I think this approach is prudent, and I have every faith that you'll give it your best go. I just wanted to ask about decisions that were for expenditure that were included in the last budget that we created, particularly thinking about the £150,000, I think it is, for the Environment Committee. Is that up for grabs as well, or
through you, Chair, items like that, and I think all of the items which went through this year were one-off items, which is to say that they're drawn from reserves and they're not built into the base budget. So they won't, deleting that won't make any difference to the budget gap because it's a one-off item from reserves. But when we come to this question of needing to free up reserves in order to fund this activity and also perhaps build us a little bit more time going forward, that's when those will be up for consideration. So that, amongst all the other earmarked reserves, will need to be reviewed and assessed as to whether or not that's still a priority and whether or not it could be repurposed for meeting the commitments that we've got to make around the budget.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comment? No. So 3 items here. What I'll do is simply go through them one at a time and then offer it to you for approval or otherwise. Item 1 is approves the proposal's timetable for closing the budget gap identified in the MTFP at its meeting of 7th of February. Would you show if you approve, please? Okay, I think that's unanimous. 2, approves the introduction of a voluntary redundancy scheme and delegates authority to the Managing Director to implement the proposed scheme in the terms outlined in this report. Please show if you approve. Again, unanimous. And 3, approves the reallocation of up to £500,000 existing earmarked reserves to cover potential costs. Again, show please if you approve. And unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report is asking for members' approval to align some of the council's own funding to complete a project which we have underway to deliver into the city centre another Changing Places toilet facility. So the City Council, in common with many other local authorities, was successful in bidding for a set amount of funding from the government's Changing Places Toilets Fund. We were successful in 2021. There was a cap on the amount of funding that could be bid in each case, and we received the maximum sum we were eligible for, which was £60,000. Members will be aware what benefit a Changing Places facility can bring to our commitment to be an accessible city centre, because standard toilets designated for people with disabilities are unsuitable for many people with disabilities and their carers due to space constraints, lack of equipment, and so forth. So as I say, there's a national programme of investment, Changing Places. In the city, we're supported by a Changing Places toilet already in the Hive and some on Worcester's St John's campus on the west side of the city. But in terms of a city centre location, we were keen to deliver something. And we clearly had an existing space which could be repurposed, which was a vacant building within the overall footprint of the toilet block in the Cornmarket car park. And the advantage of that location, as well as its access for retail, is that it's right next to parking, and there are disabled parking bays there. And as I say, because it's an existing facility that we're repurposing that once was a toilet, we were confident we could deliver the project, or largely deliver the project, within grant, so it did seem very achievable. However, since we embarked on the project, costs have gone up, and the tendered prices of a lot of things have gone up, as members will be aware. And additionally, we've had to do additional survey work on the existing facility and understand issues around drainage and subsidence to more detail than we expected. All of that has taken us to a position where we are in a position to let the works contract and deliver a successful scheme, but we do require some council investment to get that over the line. We've estimated that to be an additional 20,000. That is a generous estimate. We may be able to bring it in a little bit below that. That's a contribution that contemplates a degree of the annual revenue implications of adding this to our existing cleaning and maintenance facility. So hopefully the recommendations in the report are self-explanatory, and I would just want to reassure that on the basis of a successful approval tonight, if that's what you agree, we have the contractor appointed, we have the plans signed off from Muscular Dystrophy UK, and we're ready to go in terms of commissioning the works.
Sean, thank you. Questions or comment, please? Robin Norfolk.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hugely keen to support this motion and obviously do so. It will help disabled families and carers of disabled people. The city is a tourist destination. Evidence suggests that with Changing Places toilets, footfall from disabled people will increase, spend and dwell time will increase as well. So a Changing Places loo in the city centre will not just be good for business, it will also be good for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have, I obviously welcome the introduction of a Changing Places in this location. As my family have been great users with our son of these facilities, they're absolutely crucial. I do have one reservation with regards to the number of disabled car parking spaces in that location. They are always full, and it's very difficult to get a disabled car parking space in that location. Can anything be done to either have one of those spaces allocated, although it's difficult to enforce, but one of those allocated for users of the Changing Places toilet, or can anything be done, or can we have an extra disabled space, or has that been looked at in any way, because they are always well used?
Thank you very much for the question. Absolutely, we can look at that, and we will look at that. I'm very grateful for the feedback. Closer to the point of launch, we're obviously keen to promote the facility and get engagement from people who will make use of the facility. And so hearing feedback like that now is extremely valuable, and no doubt is something that we would have been told later on in any event. So we will take that away and look at that. We'll need to speak to parking colleagues about how that would work in practice, but yes, very happy to keep you updated on that.
Any further questions or comment? Lyndon.
I mean, just to say, I very much welcome it as well. It's part of, our aspiration for, being a more inclusive city, and, having facilities and welcome for everyone.
So I should just echo that it is a welcome facility, and thank you, and it doesn't cost too much either, so it's good. It's all good. Win-win.
I think we all concur, myself included. Anyone else? Jabba Riaz.
Thank you, Chair. Just following in that same vein, I mean, it just shows the importance what our sort of council champions do, and Councillor Robin Norfolk needs to be praised in her role as EDI champion in terms of identifying the opportunity.
Thank you. Any further questions or comment? No. So one is, we recommend to council the inclusion of the provision of a new changing places toilet at the core market in the council's capital programme. And two, we recommend to council that the capital programme is adjusted to include 60k of grant funding for the project and 20k supported by borrowing. Would those in favour please show? Thank you. And we move to item 7, cost of living task and finish group, and Lloyd will take the chair. So, Lloyd, when you're ready, it's yours.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The report in front of you this evening looks to conclude the work of the cost of living task and finish group, and also informs members that oversight for the impact of cost of living on our residents is now intended to be taken up by the Health and Wellbeing Committee. So most members will be aware that back in May, this committee approved the establishment of a cross-party working group to look at what the council, the role it could play in tackling cost of living and supporting our residents. Membership of the group is outlined at paragraph 2.2. Since that time, the group has met on 13 occasions, starting in June of last year, and its last meeting was on March of this year. And the report hopefully sets out clearly the work of that group. One of the key bits of work with the group was around free school meals. So again, some members will remember that the Task and Finish group proposed the extension of the provision of free school meals for the remaining period of the summer holidays of last year that wasn't being covered by the County Council, so just over 4 weeks of provision. And we took it one step further. We actually provided free school meals, or the funding for free school meals, to both preschool aged children and those 16 to 18 years old. And the cost of that was £215,000. And that was met through the hardship reserve the council had at that time. Following on from that, in September, the Task and Finish group again proposed that we further supported the provision of free school meals. And at that time, an allocation was again made from hardship money for a further 4 weeks to cover half terms and the Christmas period. In the end, money was found from the County Council through national funding, and they actually funded the whole 100% of that provision. What we did do, however, we put some money aside, and that money was used to fund the preschool element on the 16 to 18-year-olds for that 4-week period. So again, there's a contribution there from the council to those two groups. The other set of funding that we provided, again through a recommendation to the Task and Finish group, was for additional funding for Citizens Advice. And we funded a half a post around an advice quality supervisor at the cost of £20,000, again allocated from the hardship reserve. And that allowed Citizens Advice to enable additional volunteers to support people coming through their door around debt assessment and income maximisation. Paragraph 2.8 is quite telling, I think. Through that funding, we were able to enable far more people to access support from Citizens Advice. And the financial outcome of that was around £160,000 in additional income for clients. So it's a relatively small financial contribution for a significantly higher financial outcome. And I suppose probably the most public-facing output from the work of the group was the cost of living conferences. Back in July, the initial cost of living conference was held, and over 60 individuals representing over 30 organisations attended. And the key outcome of that event was the development of a directory of services that we've ultimately put onto, we socialised and is on our website, and we are told still gets quite a bit of coverage and usage to this day. Spinning out of the initial conference was then 3 further conferences, and this was based on discussions and feedback we received at the initial conference. And they focused on income maximisation and financial support. That was held in November 2022. Housing and homelessness in early this year. And the final mini conference being held around health and wellbeing in March of this year. And I'd just like to place on record my thanks to Tom Mountford, Warwick and the team for the role they played in bringing those conferences together and holding them, as well as Task and Finish Group members for the way they hosted and set the scene at each event. Paragraphs 2.12 to 2.14 outline some of the topics that were covered at each of the mini conferences and some of those attendees. And the takeaway actions from each of the mini conferences is included at Appendix 1, and certainly that will be the focus of the Health and Wellbeing Committee over the next 12 months, is to hold officers to account for delivery of those actions and progressing them. And as part of those conversations, they've certainly also helped us in being able to think about and lead to how we use our household support fund allocation for this year, and how we use our child poverty funding, which has also been committed now at a previous committee. There was other sort of social media and publication work. I've mentioned the development of the dedicated web pages on the council website. We also had posters with a QR code that linked people straight through to that advice. We've had an article in City Life, and we've also promoted warm spaces across the city as well. And as I say, that agency directory of services that outlines what services provide and who the key contacts are is still being well used as we speak. And in order to continue this work and some of those discussions, there are a number of forums that already exist and have done for some time across the city. And we've referenced to there the Worcester Cares Partnership and the Healthy Worcester Forum. They're sort of natural forums that sit and can continue with the conversations moving forward. So we've set out the financial contribution from the council at paragraph 220. And as I say, Chair, just to finish off, the intention now is for the council and monitoring the impact of cost of living on residents in particular to be overseen by Health and Wellbeing Committee. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Many thanks. Questions or comment to Lloyd, please? Adrian.
Thanks, Lloyd, for that. I mean, I think this was clearly a very good exercise, and we were also fortunate to have some funding behind it that we were able to use, but it's in the past. And despite what a rich man at a meeting in Japan said recently, the cost of living crisis is by no means over. So while the responsibility to continue responding to it, to monitor it and deal with it, and address issues clearly with the Health and Wellbeing Committee, there's no actual funding attached to that now, is there? So presumably we now just have to adapt and use whatever ways and means we can as a council to support similar sorts of processes that we have done in the last 12 months. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Financial support is critical. Financial support is critical. And I think we've talked as a CLT about as a council about being smarter to identify and pursue funding opportunities, whether that be through national funding or through other avenues. So that will continue. But one of the final summing up paragraphs in this report is we've also got a role in holding other agencies to account for what they're responsible for. So that's certainly one aspect of it as well. And the council can play an enabling role, not just through finance, but through use of its assets, through its parks and open spaces and other assets that we hold. So yeah, it's definitely a mix and match approach, Adrian.
Any further questions or comment? Lynn.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to officers because they have put a lot of work into this, and thank you to all those that have contributed to the Task and Finish group and coming together. Worcester people and volunteers are just absolutely brilliant, and it's They are doing an enormous amount to help fellow citizens and ensure that people don't fall through the gaps in the net. There's obviously, there's been some really useful joint working and cooperation between agencies and groups, which I think have arisen out of this. To reiterate the point that, it is not primarily the responsibility of this council, but I certainly can't ignore the fact of that there are families going hungry within the city and people unable to pay their bills. And it was part of the Labour group's priorities in terms of budget setting that we have that do fall within our remit, some of those in place, like discretionary welfare assistance scheme and support for people unable to pay their council tax bills, and those are really important. With regard to the money, perhaps if Lloyd could confirm, I think the second half of paragraph 220, that's funding for the current financial year, I think, because the government have made available the household support fund for this year. We might be falling off a cliff at the end of the year, depending on what the government is or thinks at that point.
Yeah, thanks for that. I just noticed the typo actually. So the second half of paragraph 220, you've got the figure of 353,686, then the figure of 50,000. That should be preceded by the following has been allocated for 23-24 and not 22-23. So in total there's £383,000 of funding which this council is committed to supporting this area of work during 23-24. My apologies.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think sometimes it's very easy in the press and through the media to concentrate on some of our difficulties and troubles. And no doubt one of the reports earlier on this agenda will pick up some media attention. I just hope that this report here, which demonstrates that we have provided in excess of £1 million to help those individuals, families and members of the community in the city that are suffering the most through financial hardship. I hope that that also picks up a headline somewhere and we see some good news in the press, not just concentrating on the difficulties that we all face. That's a plea really from my part. And as Lloyd has said, some of this funding is for the current year. We have spent money in previous years and we hope very much that the government will continue with the household support fund in future years. Thank you.
Mel Alcott.
Chair, thank you. Just referring back to 2.4, obviously the primary responsibility for schools and the allocation of free school meals lies with Worcestershire County Council. And I would just like to have it on record that I was quite personally disgusted with the fact that they were just going to run it for the first 2 weeks of school. And thank goodness this council and the Task and Finish group had the foresight to do that, because it would have just been cruel to just provide free meals for 1/3 of the holidays. So a big thank you to this council.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And through you, I mean, I think it's worth also noting in the whole process how the sort of different agencies and stakeholders and different political groups came together over this really difficult period of time and acknowledge their part and the goodwill and the benevolence within the city to actually deliver for it. Obviously, my colleague Lynn Denham highlighted in terms of our group's priorities and no doubt some other groups' priorities in terms of that. But we have been leading the fight and we've risen to the challenge, and I think that is something that really needs to be acknowledged and put out there in terms of to what extent we've been fighting the cause for the poor, for the destitute, and for the most vulnerable in this city.
Okay, in that case, the recommendation that comes before you is that we note the contents of the report, particularly work undertaken by the TNF, and we note the work of the TNF is concluded and oversight of the council's role will be undertaken henceforth by the Health and Wellbeing Committee. Can I ask you to note those, please? Thank you. Right. We move to agenda item 8, which is Corporate Risk Management Report Q4 22-23. Shane.
Thank you, Chair. This is the, we do two updates on our corporate risk register, and just give attention to the fact that there are also service risk registers as well. We don't look at those in detail, but just to advise members of the overall position in respect of those. Since we last discussed this, they've taken a couple of changes to the risk, corporate risk. CRK007 business rates, local retention. I've put that one up a little bit, and that's partly because we have, I think we lost one of our employers in the city, but on the whole, the high street remains pretty buoyant compared to many other cities around the country. So that's not an area of concern, but post-COVID, we relaxed our approach to recovery to some extent to help businesses to recover from that process, and continued that approach as we moved into the cost of living crisis period. And that has meant that we've got quite a bit more in terms of business rates for the current year, which are outstanding. So we need to start to do a little bit of work to recover that. They'll be recovered in time, but at the moment that's increased the risk that we might lose some of that income. Although I have to say that I've just got an email this afternoon about the outturn, which shows that that picture has considerably improved. So possibly that one needs to come back down again. And the other one which has changed is around leisure centre operations. You recall that at one stage, we were presenting this as quite a high risk because of the concerns through the pandemic about the impact on the leisure centre of people not attending. And it's been a long, slow period of recovery back to activity levels from before that time. We haven't got there yet, so it still remains an area of risk, but it's an improving position. And through now a monthly meeting that we have with them, which was introduced at the time, an open book accounting process, we can see that we've got a much better position than we were. So I've taken that one down slightly. That just leaves three red risks. City plan priorities, well, we've already talked about the financial position, and the local government funding one obviously relates to that. We still have 1 year settlements for government. So although that medium-term financial plan projects a level of government funding, we won't necessarily get that. So it remains a serious risk. And the third there is ICT security. Cyber attack is something which is a real concern to local authorities up and down the country. In fact, many organisations continues to be an area which we're paying a lot of attention to. A lot of work has gone into improving our ICT security, but it's not something we want to take our eye off the ball just yet. So retain that as a red risk for the time being. If there are any questions about that, then I'm happy to talk over those. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Questions or comment to the report, please? Jabba.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through you, in terms of the leisure centre operations, I know when we originally had these discussions, the huge, I suppose, threat and danger of our leisure centres closing, and the situation across the country where many leisure centres have had to close in terms of that. And I think, we, between ourselves and officers and Freedom Leisure, and through the work that we've done in communities, we've managed to ensure that our frontline services in our leisure centres remained open and as accessible as possible. And in that goes huge credit for us to being resilient and being in a position to negotiate some of those and provide that financial assistance to ensure business, minimal disruption to the public and to users of those services. And I think we've done extremely well in that circumstance, and I'm glad to see that risk has been now reduced to a lower level. And hopefully we can continue to monitor that situation, and hopefully with the energy prices decreasing over the summer, with the potential of that, then that risk may lower even further.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comment? Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think the summary table kind of says it all, doesn't it? That the key risks are around finances and how local government funding works, and it doesn't work fairly. It doesn't match need, and we're this council is the victim of how those calculations are worked out on high. So we are dependent on income from local sources, and have to do what we can. And I absolutely agree in terms of the the risk calculations and the assessments that officers have made, and ICT security is absolutely critical. We've seen how easily when information systems don't work properly, when our car park machines don't work properly, it very rapidly escalates into poor customer service, loss of income, loss of ability to actually deliver the day job. So those are areas of concern, and we hope that we're able to do what we can to mitigate them.
Can members make any contribution to keeping our ICT security robust? Because we all use your systems to some extent.
Through you, Chair. Yes, certainly they can. Anyone who interacts with the systems has the potential to introduce viruses or other bits of rogue software which can have an impact across the board. So that's something that we keep an eye on. There is a monthly meeting with the IT Shared Services Management Board, in which cybersecurity is an item which is discussed every month. So it's a standing item on that committee. And one of the areas where we've got differing practice across the three councils in that shared service is the operation of IT for members. So in some of the other councils, for example, there is dedicated equipment which they are only able to use to access council systems. In our case, we have a system of providing a fee or an allowance which members use to buy their own equipment by which they can interact with council systems. So there are different ways of doing that, and we're constantly looking at ways in which we can try to standardise that and minimise the impact. So certainly that's something that is kept under view. And yes, and I would appeal to all members to be constant and vigilant in terms of their interactions with the council systems to make sure that we don't create a situation where we increase the level of risks which are high enough and serious enough as it is. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, and it's a minor point, is it only me that where the Joe Blog system blocks some Worcestershire County Council emails? So I've had a series of emails blocked that I then have to go to the administrator and ask them to unfreeze. So how, I mean, absolutely, ICT security is really important, but as to how it's set and why it trips up some things that ought to be completely benevolent, surely.
I can't answer the question as to how that works elsewhere, but if you drop me a line, Lynn, I'll look into it for you.
Any further questions or comment? Thank you. Merely to note the recommendation. Yes, thank you very much. We move to item 9, Q4 and Annual Performance Report 22-23. Shane?
Thank you, Chair. This is the final version of this scorecard for this year. I have to say that it's disappointing in a way that some of those red ones have remained red throughout. In particular, the days to process new housing benefit claims and council tax support claims. So we've gone through a period of transition from Civica as an external provider to an in-house service, and you will see from the detail indicators that those days to process are beginning to reduce. We're getting back towards the target, which I think is 13 days on average, but certainly council tax support still presents a significant time between actually implementing a claim and applying for council tax support and receiving an assessment. It's less important than the housing benefit one because, of course, we can simply cease to collect council tax until the claim has been done. But nonetheless, I'd like to see that coming down. The other ones which are red, sickness absence, voluntary leavers rate are slightly higher than we would like, but there's nothing unusual or odd about those, which would suggest that there's a particular problem. And of course, the customer satisfaction ones are to do with the annual customer survey that we do, and they will remain red until we run the survey again and see what the results look like in the coming autumn. We have, in the meantime, introduced a number of measures around contact with customers to supplement that and give us a better understanding of where we are in dealing with our customers. And you will see that our complaints resolved at stage 1 is a very green indicator, and our call answering, our responsiveness in terms of customer contacts is within the timelines that we would expect as well. So on the whole, we end in the year in a fairly good place as far as performance for this committee are concerned. But again, if members have any questions or comments, then I'm happy to explore those in more detail with you. Thank you.
Questions to the report, please? Robin Norfolk.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the city centre transport strategy, are we confident that the report will be completed by the end of this month, which is only a few days away? And it's been long anticipated. We can see that from the original due date and the due date. When will members be able to see that?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, it has taken rather a time, I think is the most appropriate way of putting it. We will be bringing a report to members as a draft for noting. I think it's important to say that this is an area of responsibility that is not ours, it's County Council. We stepped in just after the publication of LTP4, where the County Council did not have sufficient funding to commission the city centre transport strategy. So we stepped in with that funding. So it's been a joint piece of work. Ultimately, it will rest with the County Council, but we will be bringing this back very soon to this committee for members to agree a draft and then for onward presentation to the County Council. Thank you.
Lynn and Jabba.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I also wanted to kind of pick on that point. This council does pretty well with projects, and there are lots of green ticks and an extensive programme of what we've achieved. The fact that the due date on this is kind of 4 years out and not yet tabled, is a level of frustration. This is a really important piece of work. It's something that the city needs, and reference to air quality. I think like many cities, Worcester has an air quality problem, but it's not something that has been sufficiently talked about or addressed. And I think the scale of that problem and how we mitigate it, improve it, make a difference to it is a really important priority for many of us. And if the next sort of, if the building block or the delay is around being able to have a draft city centre transport strategy, then anything we can do to express that and to bring it into the public domain, because we need to be taking action around air quality. The concern is whilst we're just waiting for the report within the city, other neighbouring authorities are taking action, and if we're getting Birmingham's dirty buses, so to speak, we need to take action for Worcester, and I hope that this will come to publication soon.
Okay. Yes, David.
Through you, Chair, can I just respond to that? I think we've spoken at group leaders meetings, and we've spoken a number of times amongst our leadership team regarding air quality, and we note that the government published the Action Plan for England on the 28th of April, which sets out clear responsibilities for local authorities. And in two-tier local authority areas, such as ours, that responsibility rests with both us and the county council. And so I think just to provide some reassurance, certainly officers here are not sitting and waiting for the publication of the draft transport strategy and then the subsequent adoption by the county council before we look to take any action with regard to air quality. We have to put plans in place by the end of this year. So we are actively working on this matter now. I hope that the publication of the draft plan and the adoption by county council of the city centre transport strategy will assist us and accelerate anything that we can do to address the issues that we've got. But just be reassured, please, that and I know you know this, Lynn, we are working on this process as we speak today. Thank you.
Jabba.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. I'm just reiterating on those points. We have blocks going up in the butts that we've approved with new student accommodation. We have the city's landmark high building in an area with the highest concentration of air pollution within the city. We have lots and lots of units being converted within the city centre through permitted development rights. Yet all we can see in the general public is a lack of action on air quality over the last few years. So I understand the point the managing director is making in terms of putting plans in place, but relatively speaking, in the grand scheme of things, there has been a lack of action regarding transport, regarding our dirty buses, and some of the other areas which we can improve on. So we need urgent action, and that this report gets published and actions are taken swiftly upon that. And I know you're doing your best in terms of that, and members around the table have been urging that also. But from a general public's point of view, we've declared a climate emergency, and to be quite frank, the action has been slower than what they would like from a city council perspective to take action.
Malcolm.
Chair, thank you. Sorry, I feel so permanently bashing the county council, but obviously county council, I am. County council is a high-waste function, and I think yet again that we've picked something up again that really isn't our responsibility, and we've sort of moved forward with it. So again, thanks to the city council, really. Thank you.
Any further questions or comment? Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just picking up from what Mel was saying, it's always been my impression that in terms of improving Worcester's transport, the county has been the agency that's sort of dragging its heels, and I just wonder, well, I hope rather that the city, having taken on this piece of work, will actually give us more influence to get things moving with the county. Second comment I'd just like to make is about the customer satisfaction survey, which highlights as red, and you might see that and view it as alarming. But I would just like to comment that I think customer satisfaction surveys are quite a blunt instrument. But by definition, the people that complete them are people who are unhappy with something. So I would just like to put it out there that I think that there are other tools that can be utilised to give if you like, more refined information that can help officers and members make decisions that could be utilised across the council in the the annual survey, as well as things like customer service points that give more qualitative information.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Absolutely 100% agree with you, and they don't come much blunter than this. Unfortunately, we are acutely aware of the need to improve the quality of our customer service feedback, and to look at what we can do in almost real time. An annual survey once a year, obviously is rather a blunt way of doing it. So just be assured that it's something that you probably saw nods around the table, from the staff. It's something we're acutely aware of, and we are working to have a more sophisticated way of developing this level of feedback. If anybody's got any particular suggestions or experiences of their own that you might like to suggest, we would welcome thoughts and views. Thank you.
Sorry, Shane.
Yeah, just to add to that, Chair, if I can, and you'll note that amongst the KPIs, there are a number of new ones which were introduced last year around responsiveness and the quality and satisfaction level received at a more detailed and granular level. So that's something that's being extended out across the council as part of a wider engagement strategy that we've developed. So that strategy looks at how we engage with stakeholders and how we carry out consultations and so on, and tries to move us more to a rounded sort of conversation with people in the city. So that's all about all the ways in which we're making contact and getting feedback from that and drawing that in to advisors and influence the way we set out our services in the future. So there is quite a lot of work in the background around that. Yes, we have this sort of one every year, which is the overall survey, and we continue to keep that because we get a lot of information from that, which is then passed down to service level as well. So you can see that there's more detailed information behind that. It's just that, there's only really space here to present the high level indicator. There is a lot more going on, but certainly any suggestions, Steve, I'm more than happy to take those on board. Thank you.
Tom Piotrowski.
Thank you very much. It's really fortunate that David mentioned good practice examples and whether we could share some. So what I would like to suggest is perhaps looking at what DEFRA recommends, and there's a number of local authorities across the country that have been trialing various methods of monitoring, for instance, NO2 emissions. That's a good example. So 5 up in Scotland, Southampton down in the south of the country. Have we done any work trying to explore those best practice examples across the country yet? And NO2, so that's one of the harmful gases emitted by traffic pollution. Nitrogen dioxide.
Apologies, I think we're following on from the customer survey, which is why I couldn't kind of compute one with the other. Apologies.
Yes, through you, Chair. Yes, you threw me initially as well. I thought it was a customer feedback comment, and then I realised we were talking about air quality. The council has just, and forgive me, I don't know the exact detail, but we can provide you with an update. We have recently been awarded some additional funding, haven't we, for air quality monitoring, which will go some way to improving our real-time management or measurement, of air quality around the city. So yes, we do have some extra money. We are looking to improve air quality monitoring, and we can provide you with an update on where we are with that. Yes, thank you. I don't know if it coheres with the DEFRA best practice or good practice, but I would imagine as we've received government funding to implement this initiative, then the DEFRA good practice will figure somewhere in our processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Chair. So just to be clear, I was referring to the local air quality management framework where those best practice examples are set out. And I think for as tempting as it is for us to complain about, air quality action plan developed by the national government a few years ago, it was so poor that it was deemed unlawful by the High Court, by the way. Or wait for the county council. There is practical work that we can do in terms of taking on board the best practice, which is already there. So
Well, in a sense, to respond to Tom, I mean, Lloyd has left, who would be able to give you more detail, but we we have got nitrous oxide monitoring, is my understanding. You know, within the city, it's Worcestershire Regulatory Services. I mean, I was part of a task and finish group looking at it a few years back, and one of the responses or the recommendations at that point was, rather than have specific limited areas of air quality action zones, is actually to declare an action zone for the whole city, because that takes account of the fact that, you know, you need to move or shift traffic or congestion, not just up the butt, so to speak, but it's a wholesale thing. So there is monitoring. Worcestershire Regulatory Services do have that information available. I don't think, kind of the point that I was trying to make is that those reports have not necessarily been widely publicised as yet, and it is really an important part of committee programmes going forwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add that it's important that that we tell our residents what we're doing and publicise. And also, I think a lot of people aren't aware that air quality is a really big problem, because, you know, it's not something that you can see. And we need to tell our residents that it's a real problem. If by telling them it will encourage some of them to get out of their cars, then it can only be a good thing.
That particular report, please. Okay, thank you. And we'll move to item 10, proposed committee performance scorecard 23-24, and Shane again.
Thank you, Chair. This actually was presented at the previous committee, so agreed there, but there were just one missing element, which was the new projects and programmes at the beginning. Sorry, the city plan projects and activities. So the transport strategy, which has been mentioned, is already on there. We'll be monitoring progress of that through the committee. And one element of the town's fund, the community skills element, which is to do with development of the building block and other examples. Those were agreed at the previous one. The ones which are new, which were agreed with, discussed with group leaders yesterday, the Future High Street Fund, most of that is going to the Place and Economic Development Committee, but the Performance Arts Centre is obviously the key component of that, and because of the scale of it, the amount of funding that's involved and so on, that will be monitored through this committee. Bereavement facilities review, we have got a major piece of work to do around that. We have some pressures on the amount of land available for burials in the future, which we need to think about, but in particular we have new legislation which is going to mean that we can have to upgrade or change our cremators in the crematorium, so there's a big piece of capital work to be undertaken. So we'll be scrutinising and reviewing that through the committee in the coming months. And then finally, to pick up something that Councillor Riaz mentioned, capital works at our leisure centres, which we agreed to in the February meeting, and that was partly about solar panels and so on and so forth, which will reduce energy costs at the leisure centres, and we want to make sure we keep that in view. So that's coming through to this as a major, it's primarily around asset development, so it falls within the remit of this committee. So those are the new components from last time, and we're just seeking to approve that scorecard finally so that we can begin monitoring that from next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, many thanks. Anything there that members wish to comment on or discuss? No, so we'll just, recommendation is that it's been considered, and I believe it has. So that's, we can move to agenda item 11, Local Government Boundary Commission for England electoral review, warding arrangements, further consultation. Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I know that members are delighted that we're on the receiving end of a further round of consultation. For those who've been with us on the entirety of this journey, this is another leg of the consultation process before formal recommendations are published by the Commission. For those of us who are joining us at this point in the journey, the Local Government Boundary Commission is a statutory organisation that is required to review electoral equality only within the boundaries of the city. In this instance, they're looking at our ward boundaries. We're not looking at the boundaries with our neighbouring councils. And the process is a sequential one whereby the initial decisions that the Commission needed to make, which the City Council fed into and helped inform, related to how many councillors should the council have. And then there was an overall consultation on warding patterns. And we've been around that twice. And now we've received a communication which arrived just after the publicity restrictions around the election time was lifted. We received a communication from the Boundary Commission confirming that in response to some specific localised feedback they'd had, there were further aspects on which they wished to consult. The Commission say in their letter to the MD that they still expect to publish their final recommendations in August, because they are cognizant that we are embarking on an all-out election on the basis of new arrangements next May. And the time period between August and May is the time in which the Boundary Commission's recommendations are laid before Parliament and they are adopted unless they are opposed. So that's the process. As with previous iterations, the City Council is a consultee of choice, so we can choose to put in a corporate submission. Political groups can put in their own, individuals can choose to put in their own. We've understood and we've had the feedback that it is very helpful when the council puts in a collective submission, and we've done well at achieving consensus on enough things across the 4 political groups to write a meaningful submission each time. So hopefully we can do the same again. I think that obviously in terms of what the further consultation is, clearly that's set out in Appendix 1, and I know that group leaders are working with officers in workshops this week to get into the detail of that. But obviously all members having a good knowledge of their local patch and their city should have a look at Appendix 1, look at the consultation. The Boundary Commission has 3 criteria, and it is important that they don't breach their own rules around electoral equality. And it's important that there's administrative effectiveness. But this 3rd criteria that seems really resonant in terms of the feedback they've given is around local identity. So the arrangements and the adjustments which are being consulted on now really seem to me to relate to evidence that's been submitted to them about local identity. And I think that the council submission needs to make sure it's dealing in evidence, not assertion. I think that's my conclusion. And I think where we can adduce evidence, albeit it will always be anecdotal, about how local people feel about issues, then what I read from the work we've done with the Boundary Commission so far is that that carries weight. So time is challenging on this one. And on previous iterations, we've had the opportunity to go through full council. We don't have on this occasion, we just won't have the time. So I'm seeking a delegated authority to submit a submission which only goes as far as we can achieve consensus across the 4 political groups.
Questions or comment? Adrian?
I'm quite happy with the recommendation. I just wonder if the Local Government Boundary Commission knows anything about local government. And when you said that the deadline is the 19th of June and they will produce recommendations in August, when traditionally nobody seems to work at civil service level, I would see it sort of, even if it comes out in August, Parliament never really reconvenes after, mowing hay or something or other until the end of September. So we're going to be given approximately 6 months at the very best notice of the election. Now, if Parliament doesn't agree those recommendations straight away, we are, all of us, going to be campaigning, selecting candidates for wards that may not even exist. Do we work on the basis of the current wards? Do we work on the basis of what we hope are going to be the wards? What are we supposed to do? I mean, do they not? I mean, it is really begs the question: do they not fully understand the whole process? Because they've been in this from the start. When I met with them very early on, and they said, we've got to do this process, and then there'll be a break for elections, and there'll be a break for this and a break for that. It seems as though they haven't really got up to speed on it at all. So what are we going to be, what advice are we going to be given as local political parties about what we can do come September in relation to any kind of election process that is going to supposed to take place in May, or is there a danger it will get delayed?
Thank you. I did ask the question. I spoke to our Boundary Commission liaison officer, and I did convey the considerable level of concern there is at the council about where we are now time-wise, and I did register that point. In response to the question about would there be delay, the answer I've been given is that there wouldn't be delay because this can always be done in the timescale. That's based on the Boundary Commission's experience, but it's also based on the constitutional point about constitutionally how difficult it is for Parliament to vote against what's laid before them. So effectively, when the proposals are laid before them, if somebody wishes to vote against them, then all that's moved is that the whole lot of proposals gets thrown out. So that is such a sort of nuclear option that the Boundary Commission's experience has been that even when there's a strong, for example, a local MP in another part of the country who has a very strong view on it, when it comes to the vote, they don't wish to disturb the entire process. So that's all just the feedback I've had. In terms of what we should prepare for, we will clearly need to prepare in some of these wards for 2 scenarios, at least for a period of time. And I'm sorry to convey that message, but that seems to me the practical implications.
That's helpful, Sean, to hear, because I think that recommendation that we should prepare for 2 different scenarios is one that really needs to get out there to everybody, not just political leaders, but the general public. Because, you know, the evidence that we've had this last year of the arrangements around the coronation in the middle of a local election campaign clearly demonstrate that they have no clue what goes on at a local level, district council in particular, in terms of selecting candidates and doing the business. And it is not simply that everything starts on March the 1st when PERDA starts. You know, there's a whole process, as we all know, that goes through before that. And it's about time they woke up to that, frankly, because if they don't, you know, if they really want local government to operate at a local level and deliver local democracy for local people properly, then they should get their heads out of their wool sacks.
Do you concur with that? Any further questions or comment? Lynn?
I think we've probably got cross-party consensus on that aspect of huge disappointment that we don't have a settled answer. And I think it's worth saying, you know, the reason that some of us were silent, so to speak, on the previous option is because we were happy with it and we expected it to come through and to be implemented. There seemed to be only a few key points of controversy, I think, amongst last year's councillors, if I can put it that way. So yes, it's hugely disappointing, and I think it's also really important to say there is a huge piece of work for officers and for our electoral services. You know, they are also waiting for the new boundaries, and there's a huge amount of work, isn't there, in, you know, reorganising those and the detail within them. So it is, yeah, very disappointing that we aren't at a settled position, which Redditch on a similar timescale seemed to have achieved. Well, yeah.
Any further questions, comment on the table? No. So, okay, for the purposes of this evening, we note the proposed further consultation. Perhaps more significantly, we authorise Corporate Director to submit a consultation response on behalf of the Council, which is confined only to points around which we reach consensus. Would you just indicate thus, please? Are you happy on that? Many thanks. Thank you. Okay. Happy to pass over to Sean and Julian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As is customary at this first Policy and Resources Committee in the new municipal year, This committee makes appointments to outside bodies. So this is a routine item for us at this time of the year. That's not to say that appointments to outside bodies need to be done at this point and this point only. We sometimes do some in-year appointments as well. That's relevant later on when we look at potentially deferring some of these. So anyway, as you will be aware from the report, the council makes appointments annually to a variety of outside bodies. In some instances, it's because we've been approached by an outside body and the network of organisations around the city and the interrelationship with the council, it speaks for itself as to why the council would be interested in appointing to the outside body. In other instances, the council decides that it would like a representation in an outside body because it's had some role in its establishment or its funding. So there are several routes by which we've made that link. For members sitting on outside bodies, the code of conduct still applies. They then find themselves wearing two hats. They have a fiduciary duty to the council and a fiduciary duty to the organisation that they're sitting on. If it's a charity, they have to think independently about what's right for that charity. If it's a company, it's the same duty. So I know that members take their appointments to outside bodies very seriously, but it is obviously, for some of these organisations, it's a significant appointment. And in other instances, we don't hear an awful lot from the outside bodies, and our members report back that their services are not particularly called upon, and that's also relevant because colleagues in committee services are keen to just hone in the list of our standing outside bodies and just check in on a few to make sure that a council appointee is still required and that you as members feel that that's justified, because where they've been dormant for a couple of years, we think it's worth asking the question again. So we're not proposing to appoint to the full list tonight. We're holding a few in abeyance. And then separately, but also on this agenda, is the function of appointing new member champions. And members may recall that member champions have been a feature of the City Council governance for a little while, but about 18 months ago, we put some terms of reference behind the role to just make it really clear what the member champion is in the committee system of governance. So advocates or spokespeople, conduits, particular themes, particular communities, a key link and a key role, representation role, giving visibility to a particular issue or community. And one step further than that, I would say in relation to the heritage champion, I think it was Heritage England's particularly keen that local authorities have a heritage champion. So, you know, and the Armed Forces champion, which we're not appointed to tonight, that's recognised under the Armed Forces Covenant. So yes, outside of the council, the idea of a member champion is also sort of, you know, a recognised concept. Anyway, for the purposes of tonight, there are two member champion roles which are vacant, and it's a matter for the committee whether they decide to appoint to both of them. If the committee decide not to appoint to either of the roles, then we would refer the matter back to full council to suggest that the role is retired effectively. So that would be the process, because full council establishes them or would retire the roles. So the two different roles are Heritage Champion and Health and Safety Champion. And the Heritage Champion role was performed by Councillor Mrs Lucy Hodgson, and the Member Champion for Health and Safety was Councillor now Mayor Louis Stephen. And in the report, there's a little bit of detail about what those two roles have done. Obviously, it is a matter for members how they shape those Member Champion roles, and there's advice and guidance on that. Okay, so that's the covering report. And my proposal is that we take the recommendations for Member Champions first, and then we move through the appointments to outside body list. And I'm just going to read out the name of the organisation and the nominations that we've had, and we can just vote on those as we go through, if that's okay, Chair. So starting with member champions, the first question is, do we have a nomination for the vacancy of Heritage Champion?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Gregson.
Is there a seconder for that? Are there any other nominations? Do you want to move to the vote, Chair?
Yeah, would members indicate whether they support Councillor Gregson for this role, please?
Then the other member champion role is Health and Safety Champion. Do we have any nominations for that role? Does anyone wish to move that they want to retire the role, or?
Sorry. I was only going to say that I think Louis done a very useful job while he's been in the role, and I think it would be regrettable if we didn't have a health and safety champion. But I'm afraid I'm not in a position to nominate anyone.
Thank you. I mean, so I understood from a conversation with Councillor Stephen that he was suggesting the role of champion might be retired. I mean, he has, it has been useful. He has brought a kind of renewed focus within the council on it. But there as it says in paragraph 3.6, we now have within the organisation a new health and safety policy and in fact a new officer. So I thought it was Louis' view that a champion was probably no longer necessary. So we would be recommending retiring that particular role.
Anyone being proposed, and I think that's the logical step. So, Marjorie again?
Yes, I'm happy that the role is retired.
So I think, yes, there's consensus around that.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'll report that into full council in due course. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So if we just turn to the appendix, which is appointment to outside bodies, I'll just indicate the organisations and whether we're seeking an appointment tonight or not. So the first is Age UK. The proposal tonight is to defer for a future meeting because we want to establish the activity of that and also the correct branch if that's the case. So then the next one is the Angel Centre Committee, and there are 3 appointments to be made, and the proposals are Councillor Riaz, Councillor Aladitta, Councillor Riaz, Aladitta and Kerry Hughes. Those are the names. Are there any other nominations? Okay, I'll go until we get to something that we need a vote on, and then we'll take everything else on block at the end, shall we? That just occurred as a better. Archie's Worcester Steering Group, I've got 1 nomination for 1 seat, and that's Councillor Gregson. Okay. Armchair Project, 1 nomination, Richard Bourne. Plains Charities, 2 nominations, two seats available, Councillor Stanley, Councillor Alcott. Yeah. Coma Gardens, Halls Association, Management Committee, 2 appointments to be made, 2 nominations, Councillor Geraghty, Councillor Pingree. Okay. Conservation Advisory Panel, there are 3 appointments to be made. We have 2 nominations, Councillor Gregson, Councillor Stanley. So unless any further names have come forward, we'll proceed to make 2 appointments to that. And obviously, members, this will come out on the minutes, so you'll have an up-to-date list, all of these. Corporate Parenting Board, 1 appointment, and we have 1 nomination, Councillor Lamb. Okay. So then the next one is Cranston, formerly Swanswell. We're going to just defer that one to check its activity levels. The next one is Disablement Information Advice Line. 1 appointment to be made. We have 1 nomination, Claire Badsey. Disability Sport Worcester, we're just going to defer that to check activity level. We may be able to bring that one back very shortly. Elgar Foundation Management Committee, 1 appointment to be made. Not had any contact from them. We're proposing to take that one off the list at this stage. Fairfield Centre Management Board, 2 appointments to be made, 2 nominations, Councillor Cleary, Councillor Desira. So far, so good. You'll be pleased to know I've got to H now on the alphabet. Hereford and
W's there.
The chairman is sitting here, both fingers crossed.
Herefordshire and Worcestershire Integrated Care Partnership Assembly, 1 appointment to be made and when somebody to be able to deputise. These appointments follow Chair and Vice Chair of Health and Wellbeing, so the nominations are Councillor Denham and the Deputy Councillor Hodgson. Historic England, this is a liaison group instead of actually appointment to Historic England. Number of appointments to be made, up to 3. Yeah, not yet anyway. We have 3 nominations: Councillor Piotrowski, Councillor Lewing, Councillor Gregson. Hot Market Charity, we have actually 8 appointments to be made. 6 need to be councillors and 2 are independent trustees. The nominations we've received are Councillor Denham, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Lewing, Councillor Round, Councillor Stanley, and then the independents, Bill Simpson and Jenny Barnes. Local Government Association General Assembly, we have 4 appointments there, and the protocol from the LGA is that we can send 4 members, and traditionally we send group leaders. So we have Councillor Alcott, Councillor Bissett, Councillor Denham, Councillor Stanley. And group leaders will determine who will hold the City Council's vote at that meeting. Lippard Community Hub, we can make 2 appointments. We've got nominations for Councillor Hodgson and Councillor Murray. Merry Hill Trust, 1 appointment to be made, Jenny Barnes. Mayor's Fund, 2 appointments to be made, the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. Other trustees are still in situ for that. The Patrol Adjudication Joint Committee was a committee that Councillor Simon Cronin sat on, and the Patrol Adjudication panel paid tribute to him after his death and publicised their gratitude for his work. We do wish to appoint to that committee, but we just want to take a little time to understand the remit so we can better recommend to officers, to members, what the workload is with that. St Richard's Hospice, we have 1 appointment to be made. The nomination is Councillor Andy Roberts. Shop Mobility Management Committee, 1 appointment to be made, Claire Badsey. South Worcestershire Community Safety Partnership, 1 appointment to be made, Councillor Riaz. The South Worcestershire Development Plan Joint Advisory Panel, we have 5 available appointments. You'll be aware this sits across three councils. We've got 5 appointments to this 3-council panel. But nominations wise, we have 3, which leaves 2 vacancies. That's fine for the purposes of tonight. Councillor Agar, Councillor Bissett, Councillor Stanley. Okay. The Kiln CIC Board, 1 nomination, Councillor Gregson. Thomas Corbett Charity for the Visually Impaired, 1 appointment, the Mayor. The Town Deal Board, 2 appointments, Councillor Denham and Chris Bissett.
It is Kit Counts, that's a typo.
Yes.
It's a nice combination, isn't it?
Councillor Bissett, yes. I didn't know which way to play that, Councillor Bissett. I was looking at you there, yeah. So 2 appointments, Councillor Denham, Councillor Bissett. Transition Worcester, 3 appointments to be made, Councillor Lamb, Councillor Lewing, Councillor Cleary. West Mercia Police and Crime Panel, 1 appointment to be made, Councillor Piotrowski. West Midlands Reserve Forces and Cadets Association, 1 appointment to be made, plus a deputy, Councillor Agar, who is our Armed Forces champion, with the proposed deputy, Councillor Riaz. Worcester Arts Council, 4 appointments to be made, Councillor Pingree, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Lamb and Edward Kimberley. Now this is Worcester Bid Board, 1 appointment to be made. I think we have 1 nomination, Councillor Norfolk. Just grateful to confirm, is that right? Yeah, okay. Worcester Citizens Advice Bureau, Worcester Housing and Benefits Advice Centre, 1 appointment to be made, Councillor Cleary. Yes, I'm on the W's. Worcester City Dementia Action Alliance, 1 appointment to be made, Councillor Denham. Worcester City Parish Relief in Need Charity, 1 appointment to be made, Adrian Cooper. Worcester Consolidated Municipal Charities, the red typo, Worcester Consolidated Municipal Charities. I'm just going to, we have 3, sorry Julian, I'm struggling with this. How many slots have we got?
Yes,
2?
we've got 2 appointments to make, and at the moment we have 3 nominations. So
Okay.
those are Tracy Biggs, Roger Knight and Alan Tidy.
Yeah, so we will need to take a vote on these. So our proposal from officers was that we put each name forward. Is that right? What did you want? How did you want to do it?
I think if we go around the table, we've got those three names. We'll have to ask each member to nominate two from the three, and I'll keep a tally and announce the outcome after we've gone round.
Sorry, Marjorie, did you want to?
I was just going to say that I know a little bit about Roger Knight, but I don't know anything about Alan Tidy, so I don't feel in a position to.
So both Roger and Alan are nominations from my party, and they previously sat on particular charity consolidated. So obviously we'll approach the process in Sean and Julian's hands.
There isn't Alan Tidy a parish councillor?
He's previous parish councillor, yes.
Okay, so just to be clear, Worcester Consolidated Municipal Charities, the council can make two appointments to that. The three nominations are Tracy Biggs, Roger Knight and Alan Tidy. So we will go around the table and ask each councillor who their two nominations are. Oh, Adrian's got a different...
Could we just clarify who Tracy Biggs is, please?
The former councillor, so she retired as a Labour councillor 2 years ago, and was the champion, actually led the Child Poverty Task and Finish group, so particularly relevant to the work of the community.
Thank you. Right, I shall start over here then. Councillor Bissett.
Tracy Biggs and Roger Knight.
Exactly the same, please. Tracy Biggs and Roger Knight.
The same, please. Tracy and Roger, please.
Tracy and Roger, please.
Tracy and Roger.
It's a bit like Eurovision, isn't it? Tracy Biggs, Roger Knight, please.
Wow, Tracy and Roger.
Forgive me for saying, I think in this moment, let's have complete consensus, Tracy and Roger.
Thank you, Chair. It's clear that those two names carry the majority of the votes, so those are the names which are appointed, and we are very nearly there. There's one more page of W's, as you said. We have a lot of Worcesters. Worcester Crematorium Cemeteries Forum, 3 appointments to be made, 3 nominations: Councillor Amos, Councillor Bissett, Councillor Riaz. Worcester Life Management Committee, 1 appointment to be made, Councillor Smith. Worcester Play Council, we proposed not to appoint to this for the time being because we are reviewing activity levels in relation to this organisation. Worcester Racecourse Limited, 1 appointment to be made, nomination Councillor Riaz. Worcester River Sports Association, 2 appointments to be made, nomination Councillor Lawrence and 1 vacancy.
I can offer a late entrant nomination. Adam Scott expressed an interest.
Thank you. I'll continue and we'll take them on block at the end. Worcester Trade Justice Network, 1 appointment to be made, 1 nomination, Dr. David Tibbett. Worcester Twinning Association, 2 appointments to be made, nominations Councillor Gregson and a vacancy. Worcester Health Improvement Group is no longer a member-led group, so we're removing that from the list. Worcestershire County Council Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, 1 appointment to be made, nomination Councillor Oodle. Organisation Worcestershire County Council Health and Wellbeing Board, 1 appointment to be made, plus a substitute, again referencing Chair and Vice Chair of Health and Wellbeing Committee. The appointments are Councillor Denham and Councillor Hodgson as the sub. And then finally, Worcestershire Leaders Board, 1 appointment to be made. Nominations are for the joint leaders, Councillor Bissett and Councillor Denham, detailed arrangements to be agreed between them. Worcestershire Waste Management Board, 1 appointment to be made, nomination Councillor Lewing. Chair, that completes my run through. If you'd like to take them on block and confirm the vote. Hang on, I think Councillor Bissett's got a point.
Please.
I have had also a late expression of interest in the trade justice body. This is Councillor Cooper. I see that it's thought to be desirable that it's a councillor, and the current person current representative is not a councillor. So could we consider Councillor Cooper for that position?
You have two choices, Chair. You can decide to make a different appointment. So effectively you would again go around the table and choose your candidate, or you can defer this one to July and we can provide you with a bit more information about what the group does.
I'm happy to defer to July.
Chair, sorry. Yeah, I've just got one late applicant for the Twinning Association, Sarah Murray. Thank you.
So the Worcester Twinning Association, two appointments to be made. We now have two nominations, Councillor Gregson and Councillor Murray.
So to go to the vote with simply acclamation for all appointments, yeah?
Yes, so I've read out, yes, on block.
On block, right. I'm thankful, grateful, very grateful for Charlotte for doing that work, eternally grateful. Board members kindly show by raising their hand their agreement with all those appointments. Excellent, thank you. Great. So we move to item 12. I'm not aware of any other business, and therefore I'm asking the members give permission to move into closed session. Okay, Julian? Okay. Thank you.